When you decide to focus on yourself, you're not just making a choice in the moment, you're beginning to change the physical structure of your brain. Every thought you give sustained attention to triggers a chain of electrical activity through specific neural pathways. The more you repeat a focus like self-growth, discipline, or healing, the more those neural circuits are strengthened. Over time, what begins as a conscious effort becomes your brain's default wiring. The reason this matters is because your attention is the gateway to neuroplasticity. Your brain adapts based on what you consistently think about and act on. If you focus on distractions or comparisons, your brain gets better at being distracted. But if you turn inward and commit to personal development, you're literally teaching your brain to become stronger, clearer, and more focused. The structure of your mind is shaped by what you attend to every day. Attention isn't a passive function, it's a skill that can be trained. Most people believe they lack focus, when in reality, they've just never practiced it. The modern world makes this even harder with smartphones, social media, and constant stimulation hijacking your attention span. But the more you reclaim your focus, the more you regain control over your life. This starts by setting small, daily intentions and honoring them. When you decide to spend 10 minutes reading, meditating, or journaling, and you follow through, your brain takes note. Each repetition reinforces the circuit of self-discipline and intentionality. You're not just building a habit, you're altering the biological mechanisms responsible for self-mastery. Over time, it becomes easier to choose focus over distraction because your brain has been trained to value depth over noise. It's important to understand that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for goal setting, planning, and self-regulation, is heavily influenced by where you direct your attention. When you allow yourself to get caught up in chaos, gossip, or external noise, this region becomes underutilized and disconnected from your deeper purpose. But when you start focusing on what truly matters, your values, your goals, your personal healing, the prefrontal cortex begins to take the lead. You begin to override emotional reactivity and impulsive decisions with thoughtful action. This is the beginning of deep self-transformation. You're not just trying to be more productive, you're learning to lead yourself neurologically. And when your mind is led by intention instead of reaction, the life you dream of becomes increasingly possible. Many people get discouraged because they don't see results quickly, but this is where understanding the science of repetition becomes powerful. Change doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens through the slow accumulation of small, consistent choices. Each time you resist the urge to scroll aimlessly, each time you choose a healthy meal, each time you go for a walk instead of staying in bed, your brain rewards you. These are micro acts of self-respect, and the brain responds to them by releasing small bursts of motivation and clarity. This is how your focus becomes your fuel. The process is often invisible in the beginning, but your neural circuits are reconfiguring behind the scenes. Eventually, what was once hard becomes automatic, because your brain has been reshaped by repetition and intent. There is a psychological truth that where attention goes, energy flows. When you focus on lack, your brain becomes skilled at finding more things to feel negative about. But when you train your focus on growth, healing, and purpose, your brain rewires itself to seek opportunity. This isn't just about positive thinking, it's biological adaptation. When you set a vision for the life you want and align your habits with that vision, your entire nervous system begins to support it. Your energy becomes less scattered, your thoughts gain clarity, your emotions stabilize. You begin to feel less reactive to noise around you because your focus is now rooted in direction. This is when you stop chasing and start building because your mind is anchored in something bigger than impulse. If you look closely, you'll realize that people who have built lives they're proud of aren't necessarily more talented, they're simply more focused. They've trained their brain to stay committed to long-term goals, even when it's uncomfortable. Focus doesn't mean ignoring the world, it means learning to tune out the unnecessary so that your energy can go toward what truly matters. This requires boundaries, discipline, and self-awareness. It also requires letting go of validation from others, because external approval often distracts from internal alignment. The more you focus on becoming who you're meant to be, the less energy you'll have to waste on things that don't serve your evolution. In this sense, focus becomes a filter for your entire life. The power of focus isn't just about achievement, it's about alignment. When your thoughts, actions, and values are in sync, you enter a state of internal peace that can't be shaken by outside noise. This is what it feels like to be grounded in your purpose. You're no longer chasing things to prove your worth. You're living in a way that reflects your worth naturally. Focus is what allows this alignment to emerge. It's what enables you to say no to distractions and yes to discipline. It's what transforms doubt into action and comparison into clarity. It's not about being perfect, it's about being intentional every single day. Your focus becomes the compass that leads you home to yourself. The great thing about the human brain is that it never stops changing. No matter your age, background, or current habits, you have the ability to rewire your mind through focused effort. It's not easy, but it's possible. Every time you redirect your attention toward growth instead of gossip, action instead of avoidance, self-reflection instead of judgment, you're transforming. The process is slow and sometimes invisible, but it's real. And the more you trust it, the stronger it gets. Over time, you stop relying on motivation and begin to rely on systems. You no longer need to hype yourself up, because the neural pathways for discipline and purpose have been fortified. That's the reward of focus, a life that feels intentional from the inside out. People often wonder how to stay consistent, and the answer lies in repetition without perfection. Because the more you try, the more demanding the goal. The more you rise to the summit of perfection, you don't need to get it right every day, you just need to keep returning to your focus. There will be distractions, there will be setbacks, but each time you return to your focus, you're telling your brain that your goals still matter. This consistency teaches your nervous system to stabilize in the face of chaos. Your mind becomes less reactive, your emotions become more steady, and your body begins to relax into the rhythm of progress. This internal state, created by focus, becomes your foundation, and with a strong foundation you can build anything. You begin to trust yourself not because everything is perfect, but because you're showing up consistently. In the end, focusing on yourself is the most powerful form of transformation. It's not selfish, it's strategic. When you focus on your healing, your growth, your discipline, and your vision, you become someone who is able to lead, love, and live with purpose. You stop being pulled in every direction and instead move forward with clarity. The brain is wired to support what you focus on, so when you invest your energy in yourself, your brain responds by making that focus stronger and more automatic. With time, your dreams stop feeling like distant fantasies and start becoming your reality. Not because of luck or external approval, but because you focused on yourself until you became who you were always meant to be. As she sat watching the world go by, something caught her eye. It wasn't so much its color or shape, but the way it was moving. She squinted to see if she could better understand what it was and where it was going, but it didn't help. As she continued to stare into the distance, she didn't understand why this uneasiness was building inside her body. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the chemical of pleasure, but it plays a much deeper role in human motivation and behavior. It's the molecule that drives us toward goals, sparks curiosity, and keeps us engaged in the process of becoming. When you dream of a better life and begin taking action toward it, dopamine is the engine behind that pursuit. It's not released only when you reach a goal, it's activated most strongly during the process of striving. This is what makes it so powerful. It fuels forward motion. But the brain is wired to seek dopamine from the easiest sources possible, like scrolling, eating junk food, or chasing external validation. Over time, this reduces your ability to stay focused on long-term goals. The key is learning to generate dopamine not from the outcome, but from the effort itself. That's how you begin to create a sustainable path to the life you dream of. When you rely only on external rewards to feel progress, you give your brain a shallow system of motivation. It becomes a cycle of chase and crash, constantly looking for the next hit of validation. But the brain responds much more powerfully to internal rewards, to moments when you recognize your own progress and feel proud of the effort, not just the result. If you do a hard workout, if you resist a distraction, if you follow through on a promise to yourself, and you mentally acknowledge that effort, dopamine is released. You're literally teaching your brain to enjoy the process, not just the finish line. This shift rewires your motivational circuits. You stop chasing empty highs and begin finding meaning in consistent action. That's the path to real transformation. It's not glamorous, but it's deeply effective. The mistake many people make is thinking motivation must come before action. In reality, consistent action creates the chemistry that leads to motivation. When you start taking small steps toward your vision, even if they feel insignificant, your brain begins to release dopamine to support the process. Over time, those actions become more natural. The repetition of positive behavior trains the reward system to expect joy from growth, not escape. This is how people who once struggled with discipline become consistent, not through willpower alone, but by reshaping their brain's reward system. When you teach your nervous system to associate effort with reward, your focus sharpens and your energy aligns with your goals. The life you dream of becomes more accessible because your brain is working with you, not against you. There's also a powerful connection between anticipation and dopamine. The brain releases more dopamine when it believes something valuable is just ahead, not after the goal is reached, but in the moments leading up to it. This is why having a clear vision and breaking it down into daily steps is so important. When you give your mind something meaningful to anticipate, a project, a habit streak, a physical transformation, your dopamine system stays active. But when you lose focus or drift into passive consumption, anticipation fades and so does motivation. That's when people spiral into procrastination or self-doubt. The solution is to keep your vision alive in your mind and to remind yourself that every step forward, no matter how small, is part of the reward loop. When you feel the reward of movement, not just achievement, you gain momentum. This shift in the way you relate to effort changes your emotional experience too. People who dread effort often associate it with pain or failure, but those who learn to love the process associate effort with meaning. That meaning becomes a deeper form of satisfaction than any quick reward could provide. You begin to feel proud not because someone praised you, but because you know what you endured, what you resisted, and what you committed to. This inner pride lights up the brain's reward system and keeps you anchored in your path. You start to crave progress instead of distractions. You stop needing applause because your system of self-respect has become internal. That's when your energy shifts. People can feel it. You radiate focus, groundedness, and purpose without saying a word. In building the life you dream of, it's essential to avoid overloading your dopamine system with constant stimulation. Every time you chase fast pleasure through endless scrolling, binge watching, or jumping from task to task, you're burning out your ability to experience joy from the things that really matter. The dopamine system becomes numb, and even meaningful actions start to feel dull. This is why many people feel empty, even when they're busy. Their reward system has been hijacked by short-term hits. Resetting this balance means removing or limiting those sources and leaning into deeper sources of engagement, like reading, creating, connecting, moving your body, or learning a skill. When the brain is no longer flooded with cheap dopamine, it begins to respond powerfully to real progress again. This is the beginning of deep focus. There's also value in practicing something called dopamine fasting, taking time away from overstimulation so that your brain's reward sensitivity can reset. During this time, you engage in low stimulation but high value tasks like walking without music, writing by hand, sitting with your thoughts, or simply focusing on breath. These moments restore your nervous system and remind your brain how to feel joy from simplicity. After just a few days, you may notice colors look brighter, thoughts feel clearer, and small actions feel more rewarding. That's not magic. It's your dopamine system coming back online. You start feeling fulfilled by doing one thing well instead of juggling a dozen things poorly. That clarity can change everything because now your focus is sharp, your mind is calm, and your motivation is pure. The ultimate goal is to become the type of person who doesn't need to be pushed or reminded, someone who is driven from within. This identity forms when your brain consistently links progress with satisfaction, when your habits reinforce a sense of purpose, and when your thoughts align with your actions. You wake up with clarity because you've conditioned your nervous system to seek effort over escape. You don't fear hard work, you lean into it. You don't avoid challenge, you welcome it, because you know it's part of becoming the person you want to be. This isn't about being perfect. It's about becoming reliable to yourself. That reliability becomes your power. It removes doubt and builds a sense of quiet confidence that no external reward can match. As you strengthen this mindset, you begin to protect your attention more fiercely. You no longer say yes to everything. You no longer tolerate things that drain your energy or confuse your goals. This clarity helps refine your environment and your decisions. You become more selective about what you consume, who you spend time with, and how you spend your hours. This isn't about being rigid, it's about being aligned. You know what drives your energy forward and what pulls it back. You act accordingly. And every time you make a choice that honors your growth, your brain gives you a hit of dopamine, reinforcing the behavior. Bit by bit, your inner world becomes more focused and your outer world begins to shift in response. Eventually, you realize that the life you dreamed of isn't a sudden arrival. It's something you build through daily focus, shaped by the chemistry of effort and reward. You are not waiting for a breakthrough. You are becoming it. The habits you practice, the attention you protect, and the systems you build create the scaffolding for the future you're stepping into. There's no need to rush or chase, because every act of presence, discipline, and intention adds to the life you're constructing. And in time, what once felt like a distant vision begins to feel familiar, not because the world gave it to you, but because you taught your brain to love the path that leads there. That's the deepest power you can cultivate, internal drive, wired into your biology, focused entirely on becoming. As she sat watching the world go by, something caught her eye. It wasn't so much its color or shape, but the way it was moving. She squinted to see if she could better understand what it was and where it was going, but it didn't help. As she continued to stare into the distance, she didn't understand why this uneasiness was building inside her body. The nervous system is designed to keep you alive, and one of its primary needs is safety. When you live in constant chaos, unpredictability, or emotional volatility, your system goes into survival mode. In this state, your body and mind become reactive, anxious, and easily overwhelmed. You may struggle to concentrate, procrastinate often, or avoid taking action, not because you're lazy, but because your nervous system is overstimulated. It's trying to protect you from perceived threats, even when there are none. That's why structure, routine, and self-discipline are not just lifestyle choices, they are neurological tools. They calm the brain and tell the body, you're safe now. Once safety is established internally, clarity and focus begin to rise naturally. Discipline isn't punishment, it's a form of inner protection. When you create a consistent routine, even something as small as waking up and sleeping at the same time daily, your brain begins to recognize predictability. This predictability reduces cortisol, the stress hormone, and increases serotonin, which stabilizes your mood. Suddenly you feel more in control of your life, not because external circumstances have changed, but because your internal system is no longer in panic mode. You begin to respond instead of react. This subtle but powerful shift allows you to take on goals that once felt overwhelming. The discipline of daily habits, exercise, hydration, focused work blocks, are not just for productivity, they're grounding tools. Each habit becomes a signal to your brain that life is no longer chaotic, and therefore action is safe. This is how safety leads to movement, and movement leads to transformation. It's important to recognize that chaos in your outer life reflects chaos in your inner world. If your thoughts feel scattered, if your emotions swing unpredictably, it's often because your nervous system is lacking stability. Structure brings that stability back. It doesn't need to be complex. Even a 5-minute morning ritual or a scheduled walk each day can regulate your state. Over time, these small rituals act like anchors, keeping you from drifting into old patterns of stress or avoidance. When your body knows what to expect, your mind begins to relax. It becomes easier to think clearly, plan intentionally, and stay emotionally balanced. You're no longer wasting energy just trying to stay afloat. You're directing it forward. The nervous system thrives on rhythm, and rhythm is built through discipline. There's also a profound connection between discipline and self-respect. When you follow through on your own promises, even small ones, your nervous system registers it as competence and trust. You begin to feel safer within yourself because your actions are aligned with your intentions. This internal alignment builds confidence, not in a loud or performative way, but in a quiet, grounded manner. You start to feel like someone who can be relied on, not just by others, but by your own mind and body. This sense of reliability is rare and powerful. It creates emotional resilience because when life throws unexpected challenges, you have the structure and stability inside to withstand the storm. Discipline becomes more than routine. It becomes your nervous system's anchor in a world that often feels unsteady. One of the most underestimated causes of emotional chaos is decision fatigue. When your day lacks structure, your brain is constantly forced to make choices. When to eat, what to do next, whether or not to work, how to spend time. Each tiny decision drains mental energy. But when you build discipline and automate parts of your day, you free up mental space. Your nervous system doesn't need to work so hard to navigate uncertainty. With fewer daily decisions, your energy can go toward creativity, focus, and meaningful progress. This is why high performers tend to live structured lives. Not because they are rigid, but because structure is liberating. It removes noise from the mind and reduces the stress of unpredictability. It gives you the emotional bandwidth to pursue big goals without burning out. Emotional regulation also improves as your nervous system stabilizes. When you're undisciplined, small things feel huge. A negative comment ruins your day. A missed deadline creates panic. But when your body is calm and your mind is structured, these same moments become manageable. You learn to process rather than react. Your emotional triggers begin to soften and your responses become more intentional. This is especially important in relationships and work, where emotional intelligence can make or break trust. The more grounded you become through discipline, the more you can show up with clarity and calmness. That calmness isn't passive, it's powerful. It allows you to lead, to support others, and to build deep, meaningful connections without getting pulled into chaos. Your nervous system also plays a major role in how you handle setbacks. When you're dysregulated, failure feels like danger. You panic, avoid responsibility, or shut down entirely. But when you've built internal safety through consistent routines and self-discipline, you can face failure without spiraling. You're able to reflect, adjust, and try again. Not because you're superhuman, but because your system isn't interpreting difficulty as trauma. This is the difference between people who stay stuck and people who grow. The regulated nervous system creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, you regain control. You become someone who moves forward despite difficulty, not by suppressing emotions, but by creating a foundation strong enough to carry them without collapsing. There's also a biological rhythm to energy that most people ignore. The nervous system functions best with cycles of effort and rest. Discipline helps you honor those cycles. When you focus deeply during work hours and truly rest during downtime, your brain and body begin to sync. This creates momentum. You stop feeling exhausted all the time because your nervous system is no longer confused by mixed signals. When you're working, you're fully present. When you're resting, you actually recover. That balance brings a new level of focus and vitality into your life. Instead of constantly running on low energy or fake stimulation, you're powered by real alignment. The more you build these cycles, the more your nervous system thanks you with clarity, energy, and resilience. Over time, you'll notice that what once felt difficult, waking up early, exercising, staying focused, becomes normal. This is the nervous system adapting. It learns through consistency. When it sees that your actions are safe, repeated, and intentional, it rewires itself to support those behaviors automatically. What was once hard becomes your new baseline. You don't need to fight your way through every task because your internal systems are working with you. This is the compounding power of discipline. It doesn't just change your schedule, it transforms your biology. You become someone whose default setting is aligned with growth. You no longer need motivation every day because your nervous system has internalized the rhythm of movement, effort, and reward. Ultimately, focusing on yourself until you're living the life you dreamed of means building an environment inside your body that supports that dream. No vision can come to life if your nervous system is in survival mode. No goal is sustainable without internal regulation. When you treat your body and mind with consistency, when you offer yourself the gift of discipline and routine, you create the safety required to take big leaps. You become steady in the face of doubt. You trust your ability to show up no matter how you feel. That trust becomes the foundation for everything else. Your relationships, your health, your success. It all begins by making your inner world strong enough to support the outer one you're building. And when that inner world is solid, the life you once only imagined becomes your everyday reality. So she sat watching the world go by. Something caught her eye. It wasn't so much its color or shape, but the way it was moving. She squinted to see if she could better understand what it was and where it was going, but it didn't help. As she continued to stare into the distance, she didn't understand why this uneasiness was building inside her body.